Untitled. It's BBC Radio Oxford now. My next guest is a mother whose son Rory, at the age of 5, had a sudden and rapid change in behaviour due to a condition called PANDAS. He was treated at the JR, but there's still very little awareness of PANDAS. What is it? What are the effects? And is there a cure? Here to tell her story is Rory's mum, Laura Aylott, and also Vicky Burford, who's a trustee of the charity PANDAS UK. Good morning, both.
Good morning. Good morning, Kat.
Good morning, Laura. First of all, I've never ever heard of this. I feel slightly ashamed that I haven't. But actually, it's quite rare, is it not?
I don't know. I think it's perhaps not as rare as we think, but I hadn't heard of it either until it became quite a feature in our life. So, yeah.
So Rory, at the age of 5, as I said, he had a sudden change of behaviour. What sort of behaviours was he showing that you hadn't seen before?
Well, before it all started happening, he was really, developing normally, hitting all his milestones. He was a real cheeky little happy pickle. And then after a run of sore throats, tonsillitis and earaches, he really started to have these strange new symptoms and behaviours. He started wetting himself when he hadn't for a long time. He was very anxious, obsessive, refusing to go to school, problems with sleeping, very unusual, out of control body movements, nosebleeds. He would hold his breath like a tick. These episodes would wax and wane. And when he had antibiotics for tonsillitis, they seemed to reduce, and they'd sort of go away and then come back in a flare later. It was quite strange.
Yeah, and I mean, scary to watch as a mother, really. I mean, to see your son sort of go through almost, a complete personality change, with behaviours as you explained, that you didn't recognise when actually, as you said, he was a little pickle. He was a normal little boy.
Yeah,
and developing normally, and suddenly this comes out of the blue.
Yeah, it really did, and it seemed to wax and wane for a bit. And then last March, he had an earache that when we saw the GP, they thought that an infection was resolving, so we didn't need antibiotics. And over the following week, things went just absolutely bang, worse than they ever had before. He just completely spiraled out of control. He actually escaped from school in a panic attack. He became extremely oppositional. He was having these nosebleeds. He was really, our little boy had completely gone, and he was just in an angry rage the entire time. It was, it's really upsetting.
Oh, goodness me. You said he escaped from school. I mean, goodness me. So you're getting on with your day. You think your son is at school and, and safe. And then what happens? You get a phone call to say that he's escaped. What happened?
Well, actually, I'd taken him in that morning, and it had been difficult to get him to go in. School refusal has been something that he struggled with when he's had these episodes. And that morning, I'd tried to get him into school. And previously, he used to run in perfectly happy. And that morning, he really didn't want to go. And a TA had to help take him in, and he really felt, his heart felt like he was pounding out of his chest. He was trying to grab onto me to stay with me. I went out into the car, and I think I just thought I'll stick here for a few minutes because something doesn't feel right. And it wasn't long after he was over the fence, running in the road in a complete panic.
My goodness. In terms of the frequency of the episodes as well, I mean, was he having these episodes every day? Was this an everyday occurrence?
No. We had sort of 7 months between one to the next one. It was quite obviously after an infection that it would happen.
And did he, when he, during those sort of the normal times, did he revert back to the little pickle that he was before all of this? Until last March sort of time, and then he didn't come back after that until he got some treatment. So it takes its toll, doesn't it? It really does on you.
It was really hard.
On the whole, exactly, because it's not just him that it affects. It, as you say, it's the whole family, because he suddenly becomes the focus, because the worry and the concerns,
things just spiraled out of control. Really, it was just not nice.
So. How did the process of diagnosis? So did you feel that actually at that point you needed some real medical help? You needed a diagnosis. You needed to understand.
Medical help. Yeah.
And you sounded like you were on your knees by the time you got that. So what happened in terms of the process of getting that diagnosis? How speedy was that?
Not really. Because we'd seen those first episodes back when he was nearly 5, we'd spoken to doctors then, and we'd started a referral process. We'd actually seen a paediatrician when he was in a really good phase, and we'd said we'd seen these strange behaviours. He was always quite energetic and hyperactive, so we thought between us, maybe there's a mild ADHD going on here. And then when we hit that flare in the March, we went back to her as an emergency appointment. And then things really... I'd read about PANDAS on a Facebook group by that point, and I asked about that. And then things really started to move. She referred us to the JR, and we also got some private help. And eventually that's how we managed to get him onto the right antibiotic. So it was between a combination of the two.
And then how quickly did things start to improve for Rory?
Once he was on the right antibiotic, because we tried one to begin with that helped a bit but didn't completely resolve things. But once he was on the right one, within about 2 weeks, we really saw him begin to turn around and come back to the happy little pickle that we knew before. And then week on week since then, he's really improved massively. And he's, at one point he wasn't attending school and life was just awful. And now he's back at school full time, and he's functioning again. He's happy again. Life's just very different from how it was a few months ago.
All you want to see is your little boy flourish. That's all a parent wants to see, their children
Exactly.
flourish.
Just want him to be happy.
And be happy and be healthy as well. And I mean, it's the toll that it takes on you, and I can hear it actually, Laurie. It sounds like you've fought a lot for a diagnosis. You've been through such a period of not knowing, and that's worse, isn't it? I mean, there must have been a relief in a way when actually there was a name that... Yeah,
there's a big relief that he's improved, really, because our life really completely became something we didn't recognise, and you just kept thinking, why is he behaving like this? It just seemed unreal that it could happen.
And I suppose, you think about the future, because you don't know whether there will be an improvement. At that point, when things were really, really bad, when you were on your knees with worry, then you think maybe this is the new normal. And it's
exactly. It's
frightening. It's frightening for you. It's frightening for your family. And it's frightening for Rory. I mean, how did he cope with all of this? Because he's so young, but did he have sort of any understanding of what was going on? And did you ever sort of talk to him about how he felt, how he was feeling?
Yeah, we tried when he was in the thick of it. And really, he would have bursts of times where he was very remorseful for how he was behaving. And, he really couldn't explain it. And he would ask why none of the doctors were helping him. And now he can speak about it with quite clarity and tell me that what he wanted to do didn't come into it. He will tell me that his brain was in control and wouldn't let him do things, and that he had no control over his body, is how he would describe it now. But
it's frightening, isn't it?
No, he couldn't really.
Frightening for him, really frightening when you have
no
control.
He was petrified. Looking back, he was absolutely petrified of things like going to school and going to bed, which, we would say, but everyone has to do these things. And he really couldn't articulate quite how, with going to bed, he would avoid that at all costs. And now he can tell us that he felt that there was somebody in his room that was going to kill him in the night. And he would fight, he would try to run. It wasn't just a normal child trying to not go to bed. It was really extreme and frightening. But at the time, he couldn't articulate that very well to us.
We're going to hear more about this, and of course, the good news is, as you've said, actually, that he's on treatment that is working right now, and I suppose it's about early diagnosis, it's about early intervention, and for a better outcome. And you're going to hear
people being aware and just knowing that this does happen.
Of course, and so many people, of course, will not have been aware about PANDAS until now. So, Laura, stay there. We'll talk more in just a moment. You're also going to hear from Vicky Burford, who's a trustee of the charity PANDAS UK.
The sound of Oxfordshire. Together, we can make a difference. BBC.
Return to my guest this morning, Laura. She's a mum And her son, Rory, who had a sudden and rapid change of behaviour, was diagnosed with a condition called PANDAS. And also joining us right now is Vicky Burford, who's a trustee of the charity PANDAS UK. Good morning, Vicky. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
No, thank you for having me.
First of all, what does PANDAS stand for? What does it actually mean?
Okay, well, PANDAS it stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders Associated with Strep. And that's why we call it PANDAS, because it's a real mouthful. And it's a subset of another condition called PANS, which is Pediatric Acute Onset Neuropsychiatric Syndrome. But they're a set of conditions which, in simple terms, as you've heard actually from Laura just now, are the result of a misdirected immune response to a simple everyday infection. And they result in a number of neuropsychiatric symptoms, such as the obsessive compulsive behaviours,
So
involuntary movements.
Is it preventable then?
No, I don't think it's preventable. I would say it is very easily treatable if it is found very, very early on. So if it's identified very, very quickly, then it can be treated. Unfortunately, in most cases, because of the lack of awareness, I mean, we did a recent survey and it showed that 95% of GPs hadn't even heard of the condition. So with that in mind, a lot of our patients are sent down the wrong treatment pathway. They're sent to CAMS, and they're not actually treated effectively in the early stages.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of listening to Laura a few moments ago about the behaviour, I suppose, of Rory. I mean, I suppose it's a condition that could possibly be misdiagnosed by
Very often.
Yeah. So, and does it normally present itself? I mean, Rory was diagnosed, and certainly the behaviour, the sudden rapid change of behaviour started when Rory was 5 years old. Is that typical of when PANDAS might present itself in a child?
Yes. Generally between the ages of 2 and adolescence is when PANDAS will show itself. And yes, the thing that we hear the most from our members is that my child has changed. My child is not my child anymore. Somebody took them overnight and left somebody else in their place. And that's the main thing really that we want to stress, is that if your child suddenly changes, then it's worth investigating PANS and PANDAS.
Laura, I mean, just with what Vicky said, actually, and you touched on this before, that actually Rory just completely changed. He was not the happy little pickle that you knew and loved so very, very dearly. I mean, what's it like from your perspective as a mother to witness that, to witness this complete change in your little boy and have to deal with it?
It's very frightening. It's very confusing because you're constantly trying to find a reason for why is this happening, and you put it down to all sorts of things and explore those avenues. Like Vicky said, with going through CAMS, we went down that route as well. Just really clutching at straws. It's frightening and it's very difficult to manage because he all rational thought had gone with him. You couldn't reason with him and try and normal parenting strategies just didn't help. So yeah, it's frightening, really frightening.
Vicky, how rare is this? I mean, how many children are diagnosed in the UK each year?
We don't have those figures actually because of the lack of recognition within the NHS. There actually is no formal data, but in the US, it's estimated that 1 in 200 children are affected to some degree.
That's significant.
It is. It's a significant number. And we as a charity, we support 3,000 families. And we believe that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's only the families who have discovered what the issue is. We believe there are many, many more.
Laura, what would you have done without the support that you've sought from PANDAS UK?
I dread to think where we might be now, to be honest with you. We found the Facebook group, the charity run as a support group, by chance really. And, they told us, they gave us a GP leaflet, which is on the website, pandas.uk.org, to give to our GP and paediatrician. And they also gave us advice on private doctors we could see and really what helped us understand what we were looking at. And I really dread to think where Rory would be now if he wouldn't be at school, I don't think. That's for sure.
Vicky, actually, you're running a webinar with advice very, very soon too, aren't you? So how can people access that?
Well, that webinar is for educators. So anybody who works in school, that webinar will be available to them. It's completely free. It's taking place next Thursday, and they can access it simply by looking at our website, which is pandasuk.org.
Yeah.
All the information is there.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. And Laura, is Rory broken up from school now? Is he looking forward to the Easter break?
He actually breaks up this afternoon, and yeah, he's looking forward to having a break. But like I say, he's happy going back to school now, which is just a bit miraculous, really.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on and telling
your story. Thank you so much
story.
for having us.
Well, thank you for raising awareness, because, like I said before, yesterday I knew nothing about it. I had never even heard of this, and I think it's really important, as you've been explaining, that we all have some understanding of this, as parents and GPs, of course, and perhaps need to be a lot more aware of this as well, because it's all about that early intervention and diagnosing it as soon as possible, which improves that outcome. Thank you so much to both of you, Laura Aylott and also Vicky Berth.